In this video, we're going to be looking at the preparation of a few types of media for the growth of bacteria, namely a nutrient broth, trypticase soy agar plate, and a trypticase soy agar slant. Most of our media comes in a dehydrated form, so this is going to be our nutrient broth media with the beef extract and peptone. And this is going to be our trypticase soy agar media with the pancreatic digest of casein, the papaic digest of soybean, sodium chloride, and the agar to solidify. So starting with the nutrient broth, it says we need to suspend 8 grams of powder in 1 liter of purified water. Now, we only want 100 milliliters of nutrient broth, so instead of 8 grams, we're going to divide that by 10 for 0.8 grams. So I'm going to blank the balance. I've got my weigh paper on here. So I'm just going to take my spatula, get some amount. And already I'm at 0.55 grams, so just take it slow. So now I'm going to put my 0.8 grams of nutrient broth powder into a flask. And then I've got 100 milliliters of DI water. I'm going to pour about half of it in there. And start mixing it up. And then use the rest of the water to make sure to get all the excess powder off the edges of the flask. Swirl it a little more. Then I'm going to put a stir bar and then I'm going to stir this for about 5 minutes on low heat so that the powder dissolves into the solution. Now, the trypticase soy agar is 40 grams per 1 liter, and we want 300 milliliters, so we've got 12 grams of trypticase soy agar powder in here, my 300 milliliters of DI water, and then instead of putting a stir bar in this gets microwaved so that the agar can get dissolved into the solution. And so then when it cools, it will solidify. So now that our nutrient broth is all mixed up, I brought it over here to our OmniSpense, which is going to help us aliquot 7 milliliters of our nutrient broth into each of our tubes without us having to individually measure and go back and forth. Now I'm going to hit start. And then it's just going to automatically dish out 7 milliliters of our nutrient broth into each of these tubes. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to fill this flask with water and flush the OmniSpense. So I use the OmniSpense to also aliquot out 7 milliliters of the TSA into tubes. And then I have the remainder in this flask on the right for our plates. And then now I'm at the autoclave, and I've put this autoclave tape onto each of our media types. And this is going to change color after a successful autoclaving. And so this is our machine. So now to start the autoclave, I'm going to hit Cycle Select, Liquid, and then right here, sterilization time is going to be 15 minutes at 121 degrees C. And then I'm just gonna hit Start. And so it's going to build up pressure, sterilize, and then have to come down, and that's why we have a 46 or so minute time for completion. So I've pulled everything out of the autoclave, and we can see that the color of the tape has changed. Now it has those black lines compared to the white lines prior. And we're done with our nutrient broth now, so we can just set it aside, and then we'll store it in the fridge in a little bit. And then next we're going to move on to our slants. So I've placed my agar tubes at an angle using the Pasteur pipette to hold them up so they're not laying flat. And when they solidify, this will give us that desired slant. So now we're going to pour our agar plates. This is our laminar flow hood, which is going to blow sterile air towards me when I turn it on. And that's going to prevent any contamination from me onto our agar plates. So now the sterile air is blowing. I'm going to take my first plate, set the top aside, and take my agar. I want to pour nice and slow so that I don't get any bubbles. I'm going to do the same with the next plate, stacking that top on the other. I'll switch hands to see if I can get you a better angle. And so here is a bubble in the agar, and so I'm just going to take my lighter, just gently pass it over. And now that I'm done pouring the plates, I'm going to leave them in here for about 15 minutes under UV lights, just to make extra sure that there is no contamination in them. And then we'll come back, put our lids on them, and then store them in the fridge.